The Oklahoma Republican Party shared a viral Facebook post about poor people and food stamps, and it's just as loathsome and dumb as you'd expect, so let's take a look at it here. They say, the food stamp program administered by the U.S. Department of Agriculture is proud to be distributing this year the greatest amount of free meals and food stamps ever to 46 million people. Meanwhile, the National Park Service, administered by the U.S. Department of the Interior, asks us, please do not feed the animals. Their stated reason for the policy is because the animals will grow dependent on handouts and will not learn to take care of themselves. Thus ends today's lesson in irony. Hashtag OKGOP, and then it shows their website there. Oh, so witty! Oh, you guys are witty, aren't you? It's funny how some people read that and they're like, got him! Yeah, we're so right about everything. Republicans are great. Do you not realize that you just compared human beings to fucking fish and deer and birds and bears? Oh my. Did you not notice that as you wrote that out? And by the way, they put in quotes what they say is the policy of the U.S. Department of the Interior, and they made up the quote. They made it up. I'm going to tell you again how it's worded. The animals will grow dependent on handouts and not learn to take care of themselves. Squirrels are not going to know how to take care of themselves? What does that mean? They phrased it like they're talking about humans here. You want to know why? Because they made it up. It very well may be the case that they say don't feed the animals, but that's not, they put in quotes, and that's not an actual quote from the U.S. Department of the Interior. The animals will grow dependent on handouts, right, they just used all right-wing talking points and buzzwords, and will not learn to take care of themselves. They're like a hair's length away from saying, they're not pulling themselves up by their bootstraps. They need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Please, it's so amazing how they make things up shamelessly, and they just think poorly as they think they're nailing it. So, after it was pointed out to them, hey man, you guys are kind of comparing human beings to reptiles and deer and squirrels and shit. That's a bad idea. Did they come out and say, well, come on, that was a poor choice? No. They did offer an apology, but their apology was more along the lines of, well, I'm so sorry if you don't understand what we're saying, and if you're offended by the point we made, I'm sorry that you're offended by it. It was one of those non-apology apologies. And here's what pisses me off the most about this. They're letting you know exactly what they think. Now, come election season, they'll dance around this and they won't tell you exactly what they think. But the argument, the core of the argument being put forth here is, if you're poor, it's 100% your fault and you should fuck off. That's the argument. Oh, come on, don't give the riffraff, the rabble, the poor people, any food. They gotta build moral fiber and pull themselves up by their bootstraps. It's on them. It's their fault. They gotta step up and do the right thing. And what are they disregarding when they make that argument? Oh, I don't know. Maybe the way the economy functions in the United States of America, the way the system is structured. See, in the mind of a Republican, if the poor person is you, well then there's no such thing as a systemic economic problem which might explain the situation that you're in. But if the poor person is them or their family, oh, well it wasn't their fault. I mean, they just stumbled on some hard times because this happened and that explains why that happened, and they lost their money, and then boom, oh my god, they need help. So they can go to the government and get unemployment, they can go to the government and get Social Security, they can go and get a welfare check as well. But what do you mean? We're the good people. I don't understand. And by the way, they'll say, hey, we pay taxes, so we're just getting back what we paid in. That's right! That's right, and it's the same thing that goes for anybody else who might end up using a government program temporarily. And by the way, most government programs have hard caps and limits and whatnot. You have to, first of all, apply for the program, and you have to meet the requirements that are necessary, and then after you do that, it's not like most of these programs just go forever. Some of them have limits. Unemployment, for example, runs out at a certain point. So when they say, oh, it's just incentivizing laziness, if it's incentivizing laziness, it's only doing it for a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And then they say, okay, now you got to go, do your thing and try to find a job here. But again, they just make it up, man. And if it were true that these programs, made people more lazy, then what would we see? What would be reflected in the statistics? Higher rates of waste, fraud, and abuse, right? I mean, that's what would happen. It's like, oh, they get used to them, and then they exploit the program, and they use it when they shouldn't use it, and they take advantage. Well, we know what the waste, fraud, and abuse rate is in food stamps, for example. The USDA did a study on that recently. 1%. So what they're actually doing is saying, I want to fuck over the 99% of people who just fell on hard times and need food stamps to get by. I want to fuck them over because 1% of people took advantage of the system. Well, that's a genius way of thinking, isn't it? It's very similar to how they think about Muslims, for example. Very tiny percentage of the Muslim community would be radicals or terrorists or jihadists or whatever. And what do? They just lump them all together. Oh, the evil Muslims, bad Muslims, they're the enemy. It's like they're incapable of nuance. And by the way, for most of the people on food stamps, it's little kids. So it's like $1.50 a meal to pay for a little kid to not starve. It's senior citizens, and it's veterans. So these are the people. They're comparing veterans, little kids, senior citizens to animals. Stay classy. And then they'll turn around and say that, what do you mean? No, we're the party that's for the working man and in favor of the troops. Support our troops, damn it, by sending them to more wars and cutting their food stamps. And you assholes, like I just said, it's about $1.50 on average per meal. That's what you're going to bitch about? So concerned about fiscal responsibility, we can't spend a dime of taxpayer money. Unless, of course, we're talking about what? Corporate welfare. Blank check, bitch. Give them whatever they want and shut the fuck up. Bailouts. Blank check. Give them whatever they want. Money for Wall Street, money for war. Spend as much money as you want on those things. We're on board, and we won't ask a single question about how much it costs. But when it comes to money for people at the bottom of an economic system that is not a perfect system and in many ways fucks them over, they say, I don't care. Even when you explain to them, hey, there are working poor people in America. People that like work a full-time job, but they don't make enough money to have a bare minimum living standard, so they like need a little bit of money to survive. Even when you explain that to them. I'm against it. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But I just told you, they're working full-time, and the job that they're in does not pay them enough money to survive. And there's millions of those jobs around the U.S. We have millions of working poor people. Working poor people. Get a job. They have a job. They have a job. They still need the social safety net. Get a job. I don't care. You might say I'm caricaturing, right? There's an actual example. There's a case of a Republican politician. Somebody went up to him and asked him a very similar question about the minimum wage and it being a living wage. And his response was, get a job. The guy's like, I have a job. He's like, get a job. That about sums it up. That's the Republican position on being kind to the poor and trying to fix the economic system and have a social safety net. Their response is, fuck off. I forgot the question.